This is Sarah Mikesell with CattleSite.com, and today we're here with Gary Vogel. He is a technical advisor at Elanco. Thanks for being with us today, Gary.
Thanks, Sarah.
I understand that Elanco is heavily involved in the Enough movement, and you guys are about ready to release a beef report. Can you give us a little sneak peek at what's going to be released?
You bet. So we're here at the National Beef Cattlemen's Association meeting, and tomorrow we will be releasing the Enough report. Now, as we mentioned before, the Enough movement is about increasing awareness in animal agriculture. So tomorrow we will be releasing the report specifically related to beef. Now, as we've talked about the Enough movement, the one thing we realize is the world is moving to approximately 9 billion people in the next 35 years. And of that, 3 billion people will be moving into middle class, which creates a desire or a need for about 60% more food in milk, meat, and eggs. Now, what that means specifically to beef cattle production is that as we look at beef cattle production, currently, if we look at 2010 numbers, the average person around the world eats about 6.4 ounces of beef per week. In the next 35 years, by the year 2050, we expect that number to increase to about 6.8 ounces of beef per person per week. So as we look at the numbers and we try to tie the increase in global population coupled with the movement to middle class, we expect to see an increase in beef demand by approximately 40% over the next 35 years.
Very good. And so what does that mean for cattle producers around the world? What's going to have to get? What's got to change?
So what's really important to understand as we've done the math is that in order to supply that extra beef today, if we were to do nothing different, we will need an additional 710 million cattle around the world to feed the population in the year 2050. So if we look at what we have today, there are approximately 1.68 billion cattle and water buffalo in the world, and we have to take that up to 2.38 billion. Now, clearly, as we stop and we think about that, is that sustainable in a world when we're already using 1.5 times the amount of resources that the world generates each year?
And where does that lead the producer? I guess, where does that leave him? What's his next step?
So the next steps are really somewhat interesting because we have to look at the beef complex around the world. And clearly here within the United States, we are a very concentrated in that we're very efficient at what we do. And so a lot of the things that we do in terms of improving efficiency, most livestock producers in the U.S. already do. Yet as we look around the world to places like Indonesia, some of the second and third world countries, there's tremendous opportunities to improve productivity through the use of simple technologies like parasiticides, anthelmintics, potentially using improved genetics and animal breeding programs to increase their productivity as well.
Very good. And so from a global standpoint, it sounds like the solutions are going to vary from different, because of the way cattle are raised differently in different parts of the world. Some of these solutions are going to be different based on where people are at and what kind of program or system they're working with.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that's unique about the beef cattle enterprise as a whole, is that the first thing we all have to recognize is the ruminant animal has the innate ability to use roughage and forage as its primary source. And so there are a lot of areas in the world where grazing animals are the predominant method of growth. And so what is done in Indonesia or what is done in Brazil or Australia is totally different than what we would need to do in the United States, where we have a grain-fed business to generate enough protein to feed the world in the coming years.
Right, exactly, because the grain availability just isn't there in some of these other countries.
Absolutely, but the other thing that's important to realize, a lot of people always talk about grain production. It may not be the most efficient way of feeding cattle. One of the analyses that we've conducted indicates that if you take a typical feedlot steer in the United States, only about 1.6% of its total calories actually comes from grain. The rest through the life occurs out on grass. We typically take a yearling steer, they're on grass for 12 to 18 months, and then they're only in the feed yard for 180 days.
Right.
And when we look at efficiency of production, to make a pound of protein, it takes about 13 pounds of feed. Whereas if we talk about an animal that's out on grass its entire life, it's typically about 26 pounds of forage or feed to make that pound of beef.
Very good. So you just have to look at the efficiencies.
So we have to
where
look
you're
at the
located.
efficiencies of where we're located. We have to look at the different geographies. We have to accept that there are certain reasons why cattle are raised in different parts of the country for different purposes. We have to recognize that in Indonesia, a lot of cattle are raised and not anything is done with them because of religious reasons. We have to realize that there are socioeconomic reasons why cattle are raised in certain manners. And so the movement that we're trying to create is not one of trying to get people to change, but to become more aware of what they're doing and try to find ways that we can more efficiently produce beef in the future.
Very good. And so if people want more information on the Enough movement, where should they go to find that?
So we would recommend that if you are interested in the Enough movement, go to the internet and type in enoughmovement.com, and on there will be an application that you can join the movement, and you too can become an advocate for animal agriculture.
Very good. Thanks so much for your time today, Gary.
You bet.
This is Sarah Mikesell with thecattlesite.com.